Thanks to our sponsors Renault. The Renault Capture, the versatile compact family SUV.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for life.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen between them, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell you, that there won't be a cow milk in County Clare for at least a week.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show in association with Renault. My name is Paul Rouse and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville, by the former Kerry footballer Bryan Sheehan, and by the former Clare footballer Gary Brennan. We are going to preview all four All-Ireland football quarterfinals for next weekend. We're going to talk about the Tailteann Cup semi-finals, and we're going to talk about systematic fouling in Gaelic football. Where we're going to start, though, is with the quarterfinal to be played next weekend between Clare and Derry. This is an example of teams who have both been in the relatively recent past in Division 4 in the National Football League. And we're going to look at how those two counties have climbed out of Division 4 into the position where they reach an All-Ireland quarter-final. And Gary, I want to start with Clare. Colm Collins is the longest-serving manager in Gaelic football. He's rightly received a huge amount of praise for how he has managed Clare over the past 9 years. His record of achievement is such that Clare have been a Division 2 team since 2016 and have twice now reached the All-Ireland quarter-final stage. Now, that may not seem like an enormous record achievement, except if you look at where Clare have come from. Because when he took over manager of Clare, Clare had been in Division 4 since the new leagues were constituted in 2008. They'd finished 2013 in the middle of Division 4 and had lost to both Waterford and Limerick in that year. 2014, promoted out of Division 4. 2015 finished in the middle of Division 3, and then 2016 promoted to Division 2, and Clare have been there ever since. I'm going to start with a very big question. How has he done that?
How has he done it? Yeah, it's the question I'd say I get asked most often, and I feel like people are waiting for there to be some magic formula or some special trick that he did that got us there. But I suppose I think it's just a lot of small things done very well a lot of the time, and consistent hard work. But I think context is important. So just to start with, I suppose he played himself with Clare and played with Clonmehel and was quite successful as a player. But then ended up in Cratloe, living in Cratloe, where football wouldn't have been, I suppose it wouldn't be seen as the first sport, or wouldn't have been a very strong area for football. And he started with his own lads coming up along with teams underage and started competing in A competitions, contesting them, winning them, competing against the likes of Kilmurray Brick and his time in these clubs who were winning A championships all the time. So he had built up that football profile in Cratloe and had earned the respect of clubs all over and people all over the county because of what he had done in Cratloe, and people could see the effort he was putting into football and how he was developing these players. Plus, a lot of the best players then at those ages were coming from Cratloe. So I suppose he had a good relationship with those to start with. When he came in, I suppose the team he came into in 2014, we had actually, I know you said we finished down the league a bit in 13, but we actually had an opportunity to go up on the last day, if not the second last day, against Limerick that year. And in each of the two previous years, 11 and 12, we had also missed out on the last day from going up. So he came into a team that was close, but had never done enough to get over the line. And I suppose he identified a few things straight away and was able to put those right from a footballing sense. We played in the Munster final in 2012 and went out to play against Cork. Now, at the time, I loved it. I wanted to go out and take them on. But we left ourselves open, conceded 3 goals. And I remember talking to Colm after that game. He just could not understand how we left ourselves so exposed. He felt the goals had just killed the game that day. So from a footballing sense, he wanted better structure. He wanted us not giving the ball away as much. in the 12 league as well, I think it was. We had an opportunity in Ockram on the last day to go up against Wicklow. 3 times, I think, we missed goal chances where we were trying to pass the man at the back post and it got cut out or we missed the chance. So there was another thing he just picked up from a football and sent straight away. He wanted the ball burst in the net. You know, none of this messing around with it was his kind of approach. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is he came into a team that was ready to push on, but needed that direction, needed that guidance. And I suppose the things he put in place, then he removed the excuses for a start. So there was a kind of a culture of making excuses. You know, the hurlers get this, we don't get that. You know, this is going against us, that's going against us. And he removed that straight away. So our training venues, we used to be going all over the county looking for pitches. He booked into UL, in the AstroTurf in UL. And we didn't necessarily like going down to UL. A lot of us trained on the AstroTurf all the time, but we had that. That was our training venue. That was it. There was no messing with where are we training this week. Does he have to go looking for a pitch, etc. So that was set up. Gear, etc. There used to be lads looking and saying, "Oh, the hurlers get this, we don't get that." That was removed. How exactly he, I suppose, went about doing that, I don't know the full details, but whether it was an agreement with the county board or whether the supporters club stepped up and helped, but there was never any issues with us not getting things that the hurlers were getting. The players, I don't know if he got many refusals when he went out and asked, but compared to previous years where maybe guys were turning down the opportunity to come into the panel, we seemed to have everyone that we wanted to have once Cullen was involved. You know, and he understood that mindset that existed there because he had been involved as under 21 manager for a good few years before that. So he'd have had a good insight into what was happening at senior level. And he just came in and got rid of those excuses straight away and put everything in place that we needed, and then said, "Right, it's up to you now. Let's push it on from here." The next thing I'd say that he does or has done really well is gotten people in around him, very good people in around him. So that first year we had Paddy Kassan, and Paddy was exactly, I think, what we needed at the time because he gave us a structure. He was just finished playing himself. He had a really good understanding of the game, and we became much harder to score against, much harder to play against than we had been. You know, we had other guys, we had Leafy Fitzgerald for a year, Mick Bohan then really pushed on the skill side of things, Alan Flynn from Galway, with Brian Carson as well, and Jerry McGowan now has come down from Tordestrand and Sligo. So what he has been very good at is freshening up the coaching voice, but taking the learnings from one coach and carrying that through. So like things that we learned under Paddy Kassan, he expects those to still be carried through now. Then in terms of S&C, like with Chris Deleuze, Keith Hennessy, Rob Mulcahy, the current S&C coach, is as good as you will get in the country. I've come across quite a few S&C guys now, but Rob, I suppose, me at 32, he was getting as much out of me as I'd ever gotten out of myself, you know, because you wanted to do it for him. He built up that relationship. And then he always brings in a selector or two that are local, that have a good knowledge of the club scene, would have a good relationship with guys. And he's not afraid to go out and get new people involved, like Declan O'Keefe is involved with the goalkeepers now. He has this nutritionist involved now that maybe was an issue before. Cathal Sheridan is working with them on the psychology side of things this year. And I think that's something that maybe the players looked for. And that kind of brings me to the next point. And I appreciate I'm going on a bit here, so don't be afraid to cut me off. But he really makes it about the players. And he'd hate to think that I was sitting here talking about him. That would really drive him cracked, because he says it's always about the players, and he means that. He listens to the players. He wants their views. After every match, players have to submit feedback on how they felt they did themselves, how they could improve. And then at the end of the year, he'd give players again the opportunity to submit feedback either directly to him, or when I was captain, I'd coordinate it that guys could submit it to me and I'd submit it confidentially then to management. So at the end of the year, there's a full review of everything that happened.
That's feedback about the management things, or about the whole setup, or about how the team was playing, or about what?
Everything. everything, whatever guys saw, I suppose, you know, and it didn't matter who it came from. If it was a good idea, Cullen would use it, you know. So if there was something that a player felt could be done better, he'd take that on board and go with it if he felt it was of value, I suppose.
So one last question on Clare.
Yeah.
One last question on Clare for a second. So there's nobody can deny the progress, right? And it's Clare are now an established Division 2 team, twice into quarterfinals, but have not really come close to winning the Munster Championship. And I know that getting Kerry 7 out of 8 years is probably just disastrous, really, in terms of drawing. But the reality of it is Kerry have been, I won't say comfortable, but they never really look like losing, if you don't mind me saying that to you, Gary, number one. And number two, Clare have not managed to get into Division 1 of the National Football League, which obviously is the other great aspiration that's there. Why is that?
Well, we haven't been good enough is the direct answer, I suppose, but not good enough yet, I suppose, is what I'd like to believe. Again, I don't think there's any one definite reason, but when it has come to, in terms of the league, when it has come to the Derry game this year, Galway game this year, we just weren't good enough to beat them, and we need to be ready to beat them. But why we're not good enough to beat them, I think at times we haven't carried enough of a threat up front, that we've maybe relied on one or two people to do too much of the scoring instead of having 4, 5, 6 players that are contributing to scoring. And when those players get shut down against the better teams, that we struggle to get to the same scoring rate. I think if going back to Kerry, your question about the Munster Championship, I think we played well against Kerry in a lot of games for 50 minutes. And the last 20, particularly in Cusack Park, we never seemed to do well in Killarney, but in Cusack Park, we seemed to give them a good game for 50, 55 minutes and then maybe ran out of steam. A lot of the way we play or have played is a running game. And it's very hard to sustain it for 70 minutes. And I think what the improvements they've made in the last couple of years is they're happy to go for phases now where they have possession and just keep possession and control the ball and control the game. And that allows them to have a bit more in the tank, I think, when it comes to 60 to 70 minutes. But there were definitely times in championship games, big championship games, I'm thinking of Kildare in 2014, even the Armagh championship game, Meath, and the game to qualify for the Super 8s, games that would have pushed us to that next level where we ran out of gas or ran out of steam towards the end. And I don't think it was a physical conditioning point as such. We were very well conditioned, but we just couldn't keep playing the game that we were trying to play. And if we could bring a little bit more variety to it, it might bring us to the next level. But with that more variety comes more risk. And I suppose that's the jump you have to take then.
Bryan, how did you regard playing against Clare in Munster Championship football?
They were always a very tough opposition to play against because we knew, I suppose, the fact that when Liam Collins was involved with them, or since he got involved with them, they were always very, very well structured. They had a very good running game. And we knew that if you left space inside, they had the forwards that could really, really hurt you. And like, I know Gary said there about, I suppose they didn't. Killarney's a tough place to go. Kerry haven't lost championship football in Killarney, and since I've never lost a championship game in Killarney, and I think if I can't recall when the last time Kerry lost a championship game in Killarney, so like it's a hard place to go, and I do know it's something that we really do put emphasis on. From this is our backyard. We don't lose games in our backyard, so going to Killarney is going to be hard for any team that's there. But I recall going back to this on numerous occasions, and we only barely got out of there, maybe 3 or 4 points. I think I recall, I think it was 2014, back in Ennis. I think we might have been losing by 3 or 4 points at half time, and AMF Fitzmaurice gave us down the banks. Literally, this is not good enough, and we're in serious trouble here unless we put up our socks and get to work here. And I think, again, like that, I think as Gary mentioned, it wasn't until the last 10 minutes, I think, that we managed to kind of pull away, I think, and won by 4 points. And even at that, I think we were lucky. I think there was a goal scored. If I can't recall, or was there a penalty that Clare got back into this again, or just kept hanging on to us, and the kick they got from us. So we always knew they were very hard opposition to play against, and I suppose even from the point of view of Gary at one stage there, like I recall that game back in Ennis, well, I was out midfield, or I think I was in centre forward that day. I think David Moore went off, and I went out midfield. But like that, then we got him in full forward, and I was inside here full back marking this for that, and straight away I can say this isn't where I need to be inside here. So again, first ball came in and he got it. He just looked me in the eye, went straight at me, had to foul him, and it was a free. And all of a sudden, the intent was there. That they just knew where the game was at, and they knew then what had to be done. And Liam Collins had that bit of I just think he's a great structure insider from the point of view. He brought structure to Clare. But what I like about it, from just even listening to Gary there as well, is I think there's great respect from the players towards Liam, because if you didn't have
towards
the respect,
towards Collins.
Collins,
Sorry,
I think Collins. Like the respect that he has, players don't buy into it. Players you don't last as long as he has been doing inside or with that. And I think that's massive due respect or credit to him, because the players really do believe in him. If they didn't believe in him, or if they thought this fellow was a joke or nothing was happening, they wouldn't have had the I suppose success they've had from the point of view of being competitive, getting to All-Ireland quarterfinals of late, competing and staying in Division 2. So I think massive credit is due to him, and he has made Clare a difficult opposition. And
do you see Clare beating Derry this weekend?
I just think it's going to be difficult. It could happen. I could genuinely think for one reason being the fact that the game's in Croke Park and the way that Derry play defensively. Croke Park is a big field to be trying to play defensively. No matter how many bodies you have back behind the ball, it plays so big, and it's the one thing I would look at to see how Derry are going to cope. It's fine if you're inside a tight pitch, and that and even if you are on a big pitch, Croke Park just plays that bit bigger, regardless.
It's faster, isn't it?
It's just faster and it's bigger. And Oisín always alludes to it, and I allude to it. Croke Park is a kicking field as well. And Gary mentioned there about how Derry, that they play and catch you on a counter attack. And I think if Clare, and I know we kind of discussed this with the Ulster final with Donegal and Derry, Clare needs to be very careful, I think, of how they go about setting up this game. And as you said, Oisín, Derry or Donegal had no choice against Derry in just the final, but to try and match them as well and kind of be defensive. But as Gary mentioned there, they've improved. They've got know-how. They've tried to keep the ball a bit longer, not expend so much energy on their legs. They're trying to, and I think it's going to be tactically. I think it's going to come on to a very tactical game, I think, in the next day, because if Clare going home for this and go out and try to go at Derry early on, they could get caught open at the back, and Derry will catch them in a counter attack. So I think they do. I think they have a chance in this. I think Derry are possibly just going to be favourites from the point of view of, if you look at the teams that they've beaten to get to where they are, they've taken big scalps off teams. But Croke Park's a different animal, and I think the way Clare even went about to win the last round against Roscommon, that's another big scalp for them as well. I think they draw fierce belief out of that. So I think Clare rightly with a great chance of beating Derry, to be honest.
How do you see it, Oisín?
Well, if we look at, I was just thinking about Derry and how their championship matches have gone for them. I mean, if they wanted to script them, they couldn't have really went much better. I mean, they seemed to get a bit of a lead up, and apart from the Tyrone game, they've relinquished that lead, and they've looked, like the last day, I was very, very surprised. There was guys who were being introduced who not only had seen no championship football, but also very, very little league football. So that gives you an idea of the situation with the legs coming towards the end of the game. That's going to be magnified when they go to Croke Park. So I suppose for me, the key for Clare is to be still there with 10 or 15 minutes to go. And if they are, then they've absolutely super chance to make an All-Ireland semi-final. I think as well, it's not unnatural for Clare to set up with bodies behind the ball. I think the last day they give up, I'm not sure to give up every kick out, but they give up most of them until they were, at crisis point, if you like, in the game, and they started to press then. So that will spook Derry a little bit, I think. in that, a lot of teams tend to, give it up for a little bit, press early on in the game, and Derry like to kick the long ball. The problems I see for Clare are that Christy McKeag has not give anybody a sniff so far, and he's marked some unbelievable players. He's marked McBrearty, he's marked McCurry, and he marked Jack McCarn, and McCurry got 3 points off him from play. Like the angles that he got them off was just gives you tells you about the class of McCurry. So I presume it'll be Keelan Sexton. He'll be detailed to, and I suppose that's where, like I keep saying this, in regards to a lot of teams, but how does the other forwards react, when and if he's taken out of the game, and is the supporting cast there, are they good enough to step up and get Clare enough scores, as I say, even just to stay in the game for 55, 60 minutes. And I'm telling you, if they do, the way they finished the last day, and the way, if you just, like, if I was doing any analysis from the Roscommon game, I'll be showing that Malone point over and over again, because you know why? Because it showed the intent. And a team in a situation like Clare, who maybe wouldn't have the same belief, haven't really been there, haven't really, got over the line in some of those games. You're after coming back from, 5-6 point deficit, and all of a sudden, you're a draw, and you think, Jesus, lads, let's hold out here and we'll take extra time. No, the intent just went straight down the middle and kicked the score, and had enough about them to hold Roscommon out then. So that's the key for them, I think. The key, but the problems are that Derry have played the same way now in 3 games. They haven't wavered from it, and they have it down to a T. They'll have a lot of homework done as far as Clare are concerned. So it's going to be a really, really tough one. I suppose the other thing about playing against Derry is that I think you're at a real advantage if you've played against them before. So you have a fair idea what to expect.
League, Division 2 in the league.
Yeah, so you have a fair idea what to expect, and I think, for me, that'll stand the Clare. But they've got some problems in that, defensively. If you look at Rodgers and you look at McCaig, as far as blotting out the opposition, they're probably right up there at the top of the tree when it comes to that sort of thing.
Will there be a crowd going from Clare to support the team on for the quarterfinal, Gary, or and to what extent is hurling the dominant force when it comes to the kind of the popular imagination in Clare?
I have it written here somewhere. Clare have had 2 home matches this year in the championship. The Limerick game, there was 2,000. We'll give 3,000. We'll say. Okay, there was 3,000 at that match, and the Meath game there was 2,500.
Okay.
So in 2 home games, there's been 5,500. Meath travelled pretty well, and Limerick didn't travel that well, I suppose, for the first round of the championship. So that gives you a picture versus the Munster hurling final was a sellout in Thurles. There'll be people queuing. The tickets are going on sale for the hurling semi-finals today. There'll be queues outside Centra, and there'll be queues everywhere. You won't see that for the football games. But what I would say is the core group of people that support Clare football are unbelievable supporters. They would go anywhere. They've been to every corner of the country, but they just wouldn't be there in the same numbers. That's the reality. But these guys, I mean, that's been the reality for guys since they're 13, 14 years of age, and it hasn't bothered them up to now. So I don't think it will be a major factor.
Oisín, Colin Collins went into Clare at the end of 2013 more or less for the 2014 season. Kieran McGeeney has actually been in Armagh since 2015. And when you look at the burn there, up to division from 3 to 2 at the beginning, then slip back, then back up to 2, and has now made it to 1. What has he done in Armagh? How has he done this?
He also had a year before that with Paul Grimley, so he's been there since 14 now, I think. When Armagh last got to the quarter final, he what has changed? I suppose the culture has changed. So when people hear culture, I'm not sure they know exactly what people are talking about. When you talk about culture, first thing is he wanted people in the change room that really wanted to be there. The next thing he wanted was people in there who were going to put their shoulder to the wheel and give absolutely everything to it. And Geezer's idea of everything and some of the rest of us of our idea of everything, they could be pretty poles apart. I remember obviously he was he was captain for majority of the time that I play with Armagh, and there is like for me like there was some Tuesday nights I'd arrive at training, and let's face it, I was happy to be there. I was happy with the fact that I had made it there. Um, as far as what I was going to do when I got there, that was up for debate. And if you got the feeling very early on, when, as I say, when he was captain, that you were going to saunter through the training, you were going to do a bit of ducking and Dave, and maybe get a wee rub, halfway through training. That sort of all disappeared very, very quickly, and you're under no illusions what was expected of you. And I think it's the same thing with these players, and I think a lot of players to begin with didn't really accept that, and a lot of players railed against it, if you like, and didn't accept it for what it was. But I think the more they seen what was expected at this level, I think it helped that Armagh were playing Division 2 and Division 3 football, to be honest. Because Armagh, rightly or wrongly, would always see themselves up there with the top 8 or 10 teams. And that notion comes from what happened from the late 90s right through to the end of 2000, or not even the end of 2000, probably the middle of 2000. So it's based on a very small period of time. When I come into the Armagh squad, we were playing Division 3 football as well. So I do think that, we did have maybe a few airs and graces about ourselves that weren't deserved, especially from the current crop. And I think the current crop eventually got the penny dropped, what it was going to take. And again, when I talk about the change in culture, that was a slow enough process, I think. Because the culture just doesn't have to change with like 15 or 25 or 26 or 30. It has to change with the people beyond that. And I think there's probably 40 lads, maybe even more, who are thereabouts. I was with the under-20s this year, so there's a crew who are continually working, around the calendar to try and make themselves better. There's a huge emphasis on conditioning, as you can imagine. And I think that has improved dramatically. I think Armagh are probably one of the fittest teams in the country. And I also think what has happened is, if Armagh 5 years ago had the injuries that they had now, they wouldn't be able to cope with it. They wouldn't be able to compete. Armagh have had 5 very serious injuries the last day, and 5 players out missing. 5 of the bigger players, and when I say bigger, I mean big in stature, as in all play around the middle of the field. We'd been obliterated by on our own kick out by Donegal, and we managed to turn that around. I think the people that he's brought in, I think that personally speaking, I think that the backroom team needed freshening up even before he actually freshened it up. So, but the fact that he has freshened it up, I think he's brought in real quality there. And I think it's immeasurable, the difference that Kieran Donaghy has made around the place. And again, I've talked a couple of times about, what the players are saying about Kieran Donaghy, but one of the main things is that, and Bryan, he's a character around the place, and you need that. I remember Benny Tierney, he retired in 2002, and Joe brought him back in as goalkeeping coach, but he wasn't really goalkeeping coach. He was entertainment manager, and he took him back in 03. I think he was there 04, 05. I think he was actually maybe there till Joe left in 06 or 07. But just to have that sort of thing, because as much as Giza would be viewed as a pretty dour character, he's actually not. He realized, and I think he's got more pragmatic as the years have gone on, and he gives those players a nice bit of rope. But I think all of them have a fair idea what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And to be honest, what was going on in Armagh for 6 or 7 years was completely unacceptable. I was there. My last year was 2008. We played Wexford in an All Ireland quarter final. We'd won an Ulster title by beating 3 Division 3 teams. That's just the way the draw went. And we played Wexford in an All Ireland quarter final, and we spent 2 weeks solid on Wexford. We hardly mentioned ourselves. We concentrated on Wexford and what their strong points were, and we went out on the field in 2008, and we looked like the most confused team ever. And it took a downward spiral from there. The next 6 years, very, very forgettable, and there was no culture there. People dipped in, dipped out. So there's no dipping in or dipping out. I think all the best players in the county are in and around the squad, maybe bar 1 or 2 who maybe haven't committed fully. So I think Armagh is as good a place as they could be. And the thing I like about it is, and I know I might have said this to you before, Paul, but where we are now is sustainable. Do you know what I mean? Armagh's not going anywhere. I mean, they mightn't win All Irelands, they mightn't be in All Ireland finals or something. But I think realistically, like, if you think about it in golfing terms, par for this Armagh team is an All Ireland quarter final. Anything beyond that, I think, is major success.
It's interesting though, Brian, isn't it? If you look at the Galway Armagh quarter final, the talk has been about Armagh, and partly that's of course because of the nature of the qualifiers and beating Tyrone and beating Donegal. But Galway have quietly gone about it. They won the Connacht Championship with a minimum of fuss, and it's almost, I won't say they've been written off, but they're very quietly coming into this quarterfinal, and it's not a bad match for Galway.
It's not, but saying that, I suppose if you look at the teams that were coming through in the qualifiers, I think Armagh were probably one of the teams that the 4 provincial winners didn't want to get. I think out of the 4 teams that came through, Armagh had the best footballing team. And I'd say that from the point of view that they were playing the best football at the time. They played the best football coming through the qualifiers. I think they're fresh in everyone's mind at the moment because of the games they've won to get where they are. They've been televised. Everyone has seen them. They were big opposition they were playing. And I just think it's how they went about winning the games and the brand of football they're playing. It's caught people attention. I think it's a great mixture of kicking, running game, even Rafferty out another goal and kicking points. There's something about what Armagh are bringing to the table, and I think it all even stems back to the National League, where they went up to Croke Park in the first night of the league and beat Dublin. I think it's kicked on from there, and they've just seemed to capture the public. I think they've definitely captured my attention of how good they're playing. But I think Galway probably wouldn't have wanted to have gotten Armagh. I don't think any one of the provincial winners would have fancied it. But saying that, Galway have been quiet, but they've done their business to get to where they are. They haven't been fantastic. They've done enough to get to where they are. They beat Mayo in Castlebar. Were comfortable throughout the game, but again, with about 10 minutes to go, they just seemed to slip. I thought their game management against Mayo was horrific. They got a couple of frees around the middle of the field, and I'm surprised because of the character that it was Paul Conroy was getting them, and he was just putting a lumpian back in top of a corner inside, and the ball was just coming back out. And I'm just surprised there was a bit more game management there of get the ball, keep it, move it simple, hold possession. Let's get someone like Shane Walsh on the ball. Let Shane get us up the field and win a free. Even Paul play a quick 1-2, get us back up into their half the field, but he was just pumping it back in. And I just thought game management by Galway was poor that day. And even to the point of view against Roscommon, I thought they were slack as well. Roscommon got a goal in the end to make the scoreline a bit more respectable. But I think that they'll learn from it. But saying that, I think Galway they've done what they've had to do. I think they might be so far ahead in games that they just slept, they took their eye off the ball and concentration levels dropped. But I think Galway, they have fantastic firepower up front, and I think that they can really hurt Armagh too as well with what they have up front. And I think it's basically going to come down to, for me, and it's very basic, it's whoever has the ball. If you have the ball and you're dominating and you're on the front foot, I think both teams can hurt each other. So I think that's going to be vital. I think it's going to be vital about how teams are going to push and kick outs. Are they going to push? Are they going to drop off? Are they going to allow teams to have the ball? Galway, for me, unfortunately, I think with the way they're setting up defensively, they're still conceding a lot. I think it was a 2-16 they conceded against Roscommon. That's a worry. I just worry if you're conceding 2-16 and you're having 13 men behind the ball, something's not right. There's either not enough contact, they're not tracking runners, something just isn't right. And that's probably one area where I think Armagh could really trouble Galway the next day. But again, look, I think it's going to be a great game. I genuinely think it's going to be a fantastic game. And again, I just have that small bit of concern for Galway is the fact they're sitting idle. They've been sitting idle for the last few weeks. And Armagh have had two very, very good competitive games coming into this. And whatever you say about football, momentum is everything. Momentum is massive. And I just think that Armagh might have the momentum going to Croke Park. I think their kicking game in Croke Park will pay a dividend for them. I think there's a running game with Galway. But I just think the Armagh kicking game might just see them out of this.
After that game on Sunday, Kerry play Mayo. Are there injury concerns in Kerry about David Clifford?
Well, there seems to be. You've talked to one person, they're kind of saying, no, things are okay, but like, what else are they going to say? I suppose if you're coming to an All-Ireland quarter-final against Mayo, I don't think you're going to be telling everyone that, he's out injured. But from what I gather, from what you've been told, talking to different people, there is a possibility that he is a bit of concern. I don't think he's kicked on as well as what he should have kicked on. But again,
a hamstring injury, is that correct?
What I believe, yeah, that's what I believe. But again, look, honestly, when I've been involved with Kerry myself, the story mills, the rumours that go out, It happens everywhere. But I suppose it is a concern, the fact that he didn't play in the Munster final, and people are going to be wondering, was there a bit more to it? Was it just a knock? Would you not just go in, play it, and if it was a knock and get on with it? Or so from that perspective, I think there obviously must be something more than just being a knock. And again, if that is the case, you look at David and you're kind of saying you're playing. If he even is training inside, when's the last competitive game of football he's had? You're now going into an All-Ireland quarter final where the pace of the game, the tempo of the game goes up 2 or 3 notches, and all of a sudden, if he hasn't been training, if he is fit to play. He hasn't been training. How hard has he been training? You're not at the tempo or the pitch of the game. So that's a big concern for Kerry, because, look, regardless, at the end of the day, he's one of the best players in the country. So that would be a concern for me if the rumours out there that are around the place are true. But again, as I said, there's a lot of rumours to fly around this county down here about different stories with different fellas. So I don't know. But if it is true, yeah, it would be a concern, especially it being David. Do you know what I mean? I suppose he is the prolific forward we have at the moment. And
the Kerry boys tell you nothing, anyhow.
I don't know. But look, yeah, it's a concern for if it is true. But look, I do think Kerry have good firepower from the point of view of, even if he is out, you've what way the forwards can line up. Tony Brosnan come in, Paul Gainey's there, Killian Spillane. I mean, you do have good scoring forwards, but obviously David Clifford is a different level. So don't get me wrong on it, but it's different. I think if you were a forward or a team that would, he was your main forward and you had only 1 or 2 other scoring forwards around the place, I don't think Kerry are lucky enough to have. They're literally good inside forwards, good finishers. Do you know what I mean? So while it would be a setback to lose a player of his caliber, I don't think.
The season starts for Kerry this week. If we really get down to it, what would Jack be like this week?
From what I gather, I think he's very concerned. I think he has been very concerned from the point of view of trying to keep fellas motivated, trying to keep a focal point, because they've hadn't had competitive games. They didn't know until last weekend who they were playing, and it's very hard when you're inside there to have a target of what you're doing. You can't, if you're whoever you're facing, are we working kickouts? Are we going pushing up on teams? Are we going sitting off? Or it's very hard to plan when you don't have a goal or a target of who you're going after. It was only last weekend that Kerry decide of how they were going playing against Mayo. They only could have a week of training. This week there's nothing happening. You're only simply ticking boxes, keeping fellas fresh, trying to work on a few bits and pieces here and there. But as with regards to going at it this week, you're not. They probably had an AVB game last weekend, and that's all they've had. They've had 3 training sessions prior to going at it for Mayo. So by all accounts, I think he's found it very hard to keep motivated to try and get a purpose of training since the Munster final, of getting a focal point, trying to get fellas going. So I think he's found it very, very difficult. I don't believe they've had challenge games. So yeah, that's the big worry. And again, as much as I said about Galway being probably not prepared for Armagh having the games played coming through, Kerry on the other hand, I've said it I don't know how many times now, the last competitive game Kerry have had was the league game against Mayo in Tralee on the 22nd of March, I believe. That's a long, long time. And that's the biggest fear I have for Kerry, is going to Croke Park, where the intensity is going to go through the roof. Mayo are going to come, and I think they'll just throw everything at it. I think that they've been written off. They're going to come in under the radar, or not under the radar, but they're coming in, would have been written off saying that Kerry are going to win this, Kerry are going to win the All-Ireland. I think this suits Mayo down to the ground. And I really am concerned about Kerry from the point of view of how they're going to get to the pitch of the game. I hope Mayo it's the same Mayo that turned up the last 2 games where they've been slow starting and they've only kind of built their way into the game. And if they do, I think Kerry then will find their feet. But if Mayo come down here 100 miles an hour and try to blow Kerry out of the water, I think Kerry could struggle to get to the pitch of the game. So that's my big concern for Kerry at the moment, is their championship's only starting now, and you're starting, that's the only problem. You're starting here now in an All-Ireland quarter-final, undercooked. They don't know where they're at. They just don't know who's playing well, who's up at the pitch of it, and that's the concern I have.
Gary, are Kerry your favourites for the All-Ireland, or do you lean towards Dublin, or where do you look?
Well, before the championship started, I said Kerry were my favourites, for the reason being that at that time I felt there was the fewest questions about them. I felt they had the fewest concerns after the league, I suppose. But Dublin have potentially answered some of those questions in the way they've recovered their form, or seem to be getting very sharp again since. So it's probably between the two of them at the moment, I suppose I would be thinking. But that said, I still wouldn't think it's in any way a guaranteed win for Kerry this weekend. Like, I was listening to you last week with interest, and Mayo, like I would just never write off Mayo, ever. Like, did anyone think? Look at halftime in the Dublin game last year.
They've got 15 minutes left. Even with 15 minutes left, they looked in bother.
Yeah. So, and even though they haven't found the answers up to now, I just think they always have shown, and it is a different team. There are new guys there now that, and they are really relying on, in the last couple of games, they've gone these long periods without scoring, and they've relied on Lee Keegan coming up the field and kicking the ball over the bar. I can guarantee you, Lee Keegan won't be let run up the field on Sunday without plenty of men and plenty of attention. But if they can find that bit of form inside, if they can start finding a couple of scores, they can certainly do enough to get Kerry sweating. And I would just never write them off. I find it very hard to. I think Kerry should win the game, but you just never know.
Oisín, on reflection, what do you now think of the Kerry Mayo game?
Just can't wait. It's the game I'm looking forward to most of the weekend, because I think it'll tell us a lot about obviously both teams, but in particular this Kerry are way ahead of everybody else scenario that I'm really struggling to get my head around. But again, there's a good chance you could be proved wrong at the end of the year, but I still think that the more I think about it, the more I think, it's set up beautifully for Mayo. And the only thing in my head is that have they got the quality to pull it off? I think they'll have everything else. I'm just in that last third of the field. Can they step it up? Is there another level in them? Can somebody like Doherty or McKeel or Orm or somebody like that just kick 1-6? And not out of nowhere, they have the quality to do that, but they just haven't been managed to do it yet. Gary's talking about the periods where the scoreboard's not taking over. I mean, you just can't do that against Kerry because they just have too much quality, and they'll keep that scoreboard taking over. We just need to see Kerry. We just need to see that badness in Kerry, and I think if they can add that to their game, then yes, maybe they are way ahead of everybody else. But as yet, I haven't seen it. I don't think they're as ahead of everybody else as we think, and I think Mayo will cause them. It'll be a different Mayo than they played in the league final, and I think, as I say, Mayo are in a nice little position going into this game as far as everything seems stacked in their favour. But you have to have substance behind all of the stuff that's going on, as in the motivation and the intensity and what you're going to bring. But you have to have real substance behind that, because in an 80-minute game, you're going to get found out eventually. So it's up to some of those top six to really step it up. They have to nail every single free kick, which they haven't been doing. They have to take every opportunity that they get. They just have to keep squeezing Kerry, keep putting pressure on them, whether that be from the kick out, which again is not perfect. So if they can do that and take Kerry down the lane like Tyrone did, if I was from Kerry, I'd be worried. And Bryan Sheehan actually looks worried this morning.
I agree with you, Oisín. I agree with everything you said. I am worried. I am worried because from the point of view is that Kerry just come into the game having just not knowing where they're at, and that's the problem. It's different when you're inside in training, and I don't care what you say. You're marking the same fella night in, night out. You get to know him. You get to kind of understand how he's doing. He's not breathing down your neck. He's not going through the back yo. He's not pulling and dragging. And you mean to tell me that you don't get the same intensity from O'Hara or Oisín Mullen, from Paddy Durkin? I know. I've seen Paddy Durkin. Paddy Durkin will go through you in a second to get a ball off you. Like, I mean, he got up the field as well. It's not the same intent in training as what it is in championship games, and that's where I fear for Kerry. And look, it's been found the last couple of years they've been caught. They've been caught against Tyrone last year. They've been caught other years in other games where when they're not at the pitch of it, you can't just flick a switch inside in the day of a game and just go from playing at 60, 70, 80% in training to go to 100 miles an hour. You just can't flick a switch.
When you were playing against that Mayo team a few years ago before you finished up, what were they saying to each other on the field when the game was getting down to it?
Mayo?
Yeah.
It wasn't so much what they were saying themselves. It's just that when they get momentum, when they get a bit of momentum, the crowd comes in behind them and they just seem to feed off. I think they feed off the crowd and off that as well from the point of view. They get a run at you and they get momentum. And I suppose if you see some of their key players, if you see Keegan come up the field and kicking a score, it's not as good as two scores for them because the team seem to feed off it, the crowd feed off us. And all of a sudden they just get that pep in their step. It's like even small little things like Aidan O'Shea didn't mark in Donaghy and he came out with a ball. I think he not broke a ball off Kieran or something, I think, and he went and won the break again and bounced off a Kerry fella, and all of a sudden the place erupts and Mayo just seem to take life from that. And I think that's the one thing with the Mayo supporters is that when they do see the players giving that, the crowd give it back to them, and all of a sudden they just get going and get going. And when Mayo have their tails up momentum, they're very hard to break because they're such a strong running team. But if you have the Mayos that are, say, we've seen in the last 2 games where they've been sluggish, where they're going over and back with the ball, they're not breaking lines. They don't play. They're not that good. They play the game at one pace. It's 100 miles an hour. If they're not at 100 miles an hour, they're laboured in what they do. And I think then the crowd seem to get frustrated with them. They don't have the momentum, and you can feel in, okay, Mayo aren't at it. But as long as I've been playing against Mayo, you just knew you were in for one hell of an afternoon of running, of tackling. Even when they were tackling, like say Killian O'Connor, people don't realise how much tackling he does. And he gets stuck in, and he's constantly in your face. Andy Moran was the same. Kevin McLaughlin. These fellas, when they go at it, they really do go at it, and they make life very, very difficult for you. You don't have a second on the ball. You need to know who's around you, where you are, what you're doing with the ball before you get it, because any hesitation, these fellas will swarm around you with the work rate they had. It's whether Mayo are going to have that work rate again, as you said, Oisín. Are they going to bring a ferocious work ethic like they Mayo of old and go at this game, or are they going to be sluggish? I'm hoping they're going to be the same Mayo that were their last 2 games at the start, where they were sluggish and slow starting to the games. But yeah, if they get momentum going, they're a very, very hard team to break because they feed off momentum, they feed off the crowd, and if they sniff a bit of blood, they'll go for it.
Do you think Kerry will go about fouling Mayo if they try and run at them through the middle?
No, because I'll be straight up with you. It's something that we don't ever discuss with regards to fouling, and it's you know, it's not something discussed of whether players. It's if it is, it's something that it's a very player. It's their own initiative to go doing it.
Yeah.
But I don't think.
It's an understanding of a situation. Is that?
Yeah, there's a time and a place for it. Do you know what I mean? I think, and that comes down to experience. I think it comes down to, okay, if you're caught open here and you're willing to take a foul, or you have to know about it to go do it, you probably have to go do it. But I think the way Kerry has been set up this year, from the point of view of Tyke Morley playing the +1, I suppose some people call him a sweeper, but for me, he's a back, and he's staying back there, and he's just minding the house. I think it's just that extra bit of protection. But look, the only big thing for Kerry is that they are, I think, defensively set up better. They seem to, and the big thing is with that is they're working harder. And I think one of the changes you will see the next day, I think Adrian Spillane will possibly come back in wing forward. I think because he's a big man, he's physical, he does a Trojan amount of work around the place. Really does work. And I think if you have a half back line of Paddy Durkin and McLaughlin coming up the field, or even Keegan gets a run, you need fellas that are going to be able to bounce off them, put a hand in there, stop them, willing to do the work, the hard work to track them. And I think he's one of those fellas. I think maybe even Darren Moynihan as well, if he's fit. I know he's struggled with injuries for the Munster final as well. He wasn't on the panel. He's another fella that does a Trojan amount of work, tackling, tracking back, winning, breaking ball. So look, when you're going tackling and you're at it, there's going to be fouls. There's going to be fouls. But tactically, you don't go out your way and say, "Oh, well, I've never been coached that. We've never been told we Kerry tactically go foul." But it's up to the players' initiative. Sometimes you feel that foul is better off here, like I did with Gary back in Innis. I knew he was bearing down for goal, like no choice but to take the foul and pull the jersey and pull him back. But
I asked the question, Bryan, because I was in Croke Park yesterday at the Tailteann Cup semi-finals, and there was a really good game between Cavan and Sligo. Really, really enjoyable match. They both went at it, and Westmeath obliterated Offaly. Offaly were really poor. So I want to start off by saying that in the context of it. But there was something very stark about the statistics for that match, and that was Westmeath committed 30 fouls and Offaly committed 10. Now, or 32 fouls, I think it was for Westmeath. And what struck me watching the game was, from an Offaly point of view, that Offaly players weren't getting in the position to make tackles, let alone to foul. So they weren't tracking hard enough and weren't tackling hard enough. So I leave that to one side for a minute. And I say this again, Westmeath were far superior on the day, far superior. But round the middle of the field, Westmeath routinely fouled and slowed the game down and left it a different type of game through the middle. Now, I'm not saying that was planned, or I'm not making any suggestion along those lines, but the reality of the facts are stark. It was 32 fouls in the middle, and Westmeath picked up 3 yellow cards when the game was just about over for fouls that had been routinely committed through the game, and it was stamped out. Gary, is this something that you have seen or you've noted in Gaelic football?
It is, yeah. I think it's interesting to hear what Bryan was saying there. They're obviously very, very game smart in Kerry, because they were the best team I ever came across for them. I mean that with respect, because you'd never be let break quick. You'd never be let break quick.
And
but
the Dublin senior footballers, senior footballers did it as well. They stopped you coming out.
Absolutely, no. All the top teams are doing it, and there was a research paper done this a couple of years ago, Shane Mangan and colleagues, and they looked at the relationship between technical performance in a Gaelic football game and running performance, and what technical performance factors affected running performance. And the factor which had the biggest influence on the running demands of the game, the biggest negative effect on running demands, so reduced the running demands most, was fouls made in the middle third. So the more fouls you make in the middle third, the less high-speed running, hard running you're going to have to do to get back into position. So it's kind of, I suppose, evidence for something that we all know. But if you stop the team, slow it down, give yourself a chance to get set up, you're in a much better position. Now, the issue for a referee is, how do you stop it? Or how does anyone stop it? Because the good teams, and you'll notice this, the same player won't foul twice. It'll be number 8 one time, number 10 will take the next foul, then number 11 will take the next one. And by the time number 8 fouls again, the ref is trying to let the game flow. He's trying to let the attacking team get up the field. So if he has to go over and book number 8 or whatever it is, that's 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Sure, that's even better for the team that's fouling. It gives them even more time to get set up. So I don't know how exactly you prevent it or stop it. People hate to hear of rule changes or talk of adjusting the rules. I think if we are really serious about trying to reward attack and play and give teams an opportunity to attack, I'd be in favour of some sort of a rule where if there's a foul like that in the middle third, the player who's fouled can pop the ball up to a teammate who can run the free. They don't have to kick it. They can run on with possession if they wish. And that would it might at least punish that foul. So if there's a player after being dragged to the ground or fouled, he's taken out of the play, someone else can run on with it and speed the game up. But obviously that's not going to happen.
I have to say I haven't thought about it, but instinctively I like that idea.
Yeah, but I suppose look,
Sorry, Bryan.
It's a good, it is a good idea. In fairness, it is. But again, the problem I have is it's a lot for referees to try and look after all this. There's so much going on with referees. There's one man, he's trying to look inside if there's someone holding. He's trying to say, is he played the ball? Has he hopped the ball twice? Or has he fouled? Unless you're someone that's picking this up on the stand and say that's his 3rd foul, that's his 4th foul, and just speaking to his ear, then he might be able to do something about it. But as Gary said, you're trying to let the game run. You don't want to be going booking fellas. And I think the biggest problem we have is the definition of the tackle. You could have one referee that will see a tackle being a foul, but is that a cynical foul or was it an intentional foul? Did he mean to foul him? And it's very hard to do it. And I think the other thing is, like, the whole game at the moment has gone to a running game. If you're running the game, you're going to be tackled. Fellas are going to chase. Fellas are going to hands in. And there's a way more tackling involved as a result of it. And especially in the middle third, you see very few teams pushing high up the field and trying to tackle inside the opposition's 45 or top of the D. Maybe you can if there's a mismatch or there's you've an extra number or there's a bad pass and you can go in and take the risk. But teams don't do that. Teams start dropping because they don't want to be exposed at the back. Therefore, your middle third is where the tackles are happening. But I just find it very hard. There's no definition in a tackle. I mean, if you watch hurling, like some of the challenges I find going to hurling, if they went down on the football pitch, there'd be no gameplay. There'd be freeze all day. Do you know what I mean? So it's just completely different on the perception of what's a tackle. There's no defined tackle in football. Some referee will allow an awful lot of contact to go on. Other referee won't allow it. If there's a player coming at you and you stop him, some referee will say, "Oh, you were shorter than me to the front. It's a free." Another referee say, "Well, you ran into him. where's the interpretation? You're left your hand in, with your hand out. You know what I mean? And I always find even the longer the championship goes on, the way more the referees let the game flow. They let it go. Whereas in the start of the league and the start of the championship, there's, as I call it, there's fouls for bare minimum contact. It's like basketball. Do you know what I mean? Whereas as it goes on in the championship, the referees let the game flow. But I just think because there's no clear definition in the tackle. And you have different referees, different reffing different games. It's very hard to get consistent on where it's going to be. So I don't know how they're going to clear it up, but it's going to be very difficult. And on that point, with regards to, if you feel that you're going up against a team that's tactically fouling, and I recall it from one or two club games that we played, what we would purposely do is, in the build up to the game, you'll say, "Oh, I hope the referee keeps an eye on it. I hope the referee is a good game. I hope he doesn't." You get someone in your PR team, a selector or someone, to make a comment and that we found out these fellas are fouling an awful lot in the middle third, and we hope the referee will keep an eye on that. And you kind of put that into the referee's head before the game. That's okay. I'll keep an eye on this. Or if you've again a player that can talk to the referee, be it a captain or especially kind of a senior player out in the middle third of the field, that he can pull the referee inside and say, "Look, ref, come on, they're at this all day. This is the third or fourth foul he's at. Keep an eye on this," and just kind of say to him, just a word, not without berating him, but just a little word, during a break in play or there's an injury, and say, "Look, they're at this all day. It's the third, fourth, fifth time that they've pulled us down in the middle third. Just keep an eye on it. If you feel there's nothing wrong with this, let it go, but just put the doubt or put the notion into his head that's there." So that's probably one or two ways of looking at it if you feel that you're coming up against an opposition like that. But again, look, I think if we don't have a defined rule in the tackling, every referee is going to interpret it differently. And
yeah,
no, I'm alarmed at the cynicism that's going on in Leinster and Munster.
Quite upset by it. You're not triggered by this, Oisín, are you? You're okay?
No, just thankfully we're just up here in Ulster and we can get on with just playing ball. And you just keep fouling. Then,
Speaking of which, we're very quickly going to run through the 4 games at the weekend, and I'm going to ask you for your predictions on who's going to win. We'll start with Dublin, Cork, Oisín.
Dublin.
Bryan.
Dublin.
And Gary.
Dublin as well, yeah.
Yeah, so clean sweep there. Just Cork have probably, by the virtue of the draw they got to a level of the competition which they can't believe, and it is quite the shock that Cork footballers have stayed in the championship longer than their hurlers. Not something that could have been predicted earlier in the year, and it is though by virtue of the draw. Derry, Clare, Oisín.
Derry.
Bryan.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tight game. I think just because of the route that Derry have taken, the teams they've taken scalps from, I just give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll be good enough to be clear, but it'll be a tight game.
Gary.
I reckon the lads are giving a very polite pause. If I wasn't on here, I reckon they'd be far more confident that Derry winning.
I'm still getting over the cynicism.
I'm not at a stage yet. I'm not far enough removed from it that I can predict that we won't win. I went into every game we played thinking we could win it. So I do think Clare could win. A lot will have to go right, but I'm going to give them a vote of confidence.
Okay, so you're calling Clare. Okay, Galway, Armagh, Oisín. Is this the bit where you say, "Oh, we'll be lucky to have a team for the weekend"? There's 7 or 8 lads with gout, and other lads have gone on their holidays.
Oh, we're lucky. This is a golf term. We're here on par. We're
I'm just happy to be down. It's great to get the weekend down.
Yeah.
I just hope we don't foul anywhere in the middle of the field. I do genuinely think that, having watched a good bit of Galway over the last week or so, I think Armagh actually have enough. As far as what you're concerned, that's Q-tourism more associated with the Kerry boys, and I just think that I've done that now for 2 weeks, so people are probably very aware of that. So I genuinely think Armagh can win this game.
Okay, Bryan.
Yeah, I just think as I mentioned already, I just think Ross or Galway, the way they're setting up defensively, but still conceding scores is a worry for me. They've been sitting idle again for 4 weeks now, and I just think that Armagh, as I said, like the teams they've beaten to get where they are. But more importantly, that is the football they've been playing very good football, great brand of football. They've fantastic forwards. Croke Park is going to suit a kicking game, and I think I'm going to go with Armagh for this one.
Gary?
Yeah, similar to lads. I just wonder, what have Galway done in the intervening weeks? Have they pushed on? Have they got another string to their bow, or are they still the team that won the Connacht Championship? That's not a bad team by any means, but have they added anything to it? I have a funny feeling there's going to be major drama in terms of extra time and nearly penalties in one of these last two games, and I could well see this one going to extra time. And I just give it to Armagh after extra time.
Okay. And I
Jeez,
think
Chris, we'll never get home from Croke Park.
Yes. I think we'll all agree that the most exciting game of the weekend is Kerry Armagh. Oisín, call it now.
Kerry Armagh.
Sorry, Kerry Mayo.
Yeah.
I thought you were skipping forward to All Ireland final, but look at everything about this game, would tell you, like, you'd be crazy to think that Mayo on the current form could beat Kerry. And I think the logical thing to do is to go with Kerry. So I think Kerry will win it, but I do think that Mayo will cause them unbelievable amount of problems. I just don't think they just have that extra little bit of quality. But I do hope, for everyone's sake, for Kerry's sake, for Mayo's sake, for everybody that's watching, that Mayo would make this the battle of all battles. And I think when we come out of it, when we come out of Sunday evening, we'll then be able to say definitively, Kerry are on a different level, or they're in the pack and they have an opportunity to win All Ireland, which I think they are there now. I think they have a realistic, obviously, an opportunity to win All Ireland. I just don't think they're way ahead of everybody else, but they could put a big dent in that belief that everybody has at the weekend. So I mean, it's a huge game for them, and I actually even think that Kerry can win an All Ireland without David Clifford. I really do. But I think the worries for me are how good they are defensively, and the structure that they have defensively. How much does that take away from what they're doing going forward? The reaction of who they play in the half forward line and their kick out strategy. So, it's a hesitant nod for Kerry.
Bryan?
Look, yeah, it's going to be I think this game will go right down to the wire. I think there'll be very, very little in it. I think you definitely won't have a repeat of the league final, from the point of view that Mayo didn't show up. But even looking back on the league final, the players they were missing on the day, big players, key players, didn't help them. I think they also had their eye on Galway. I think they were playing possibly 2 or 3 weeks' time. They were playing Galway in the first round of the championship. So I think that was kind of obviously in the back of the mind as well. But look, I couldn't come on here and not back Kerry, to be honest. Like, so, look, I genuinely do. Kerry will prevail in the end, but I think it might even come down to the substitutions. I think Kerry have a good bench. I think they like to bring in David Moore at the middle of the field. I think. I don't think they'll start him. I think I'd like to hold him in reserve. I think he'll add a bit of experience coming in. I think you'll get more of Davis coming in than maybe start him and bring in Jack Barry if Davis' legs don't. David has no football played all year as such. So I think starting would be a big gamble, and I think you'll probably get more out of Davis bringing him in than you would start him. I think he'd have more of an influence rather than not starting him or starting him and bringing in Jack Barry. I think David will have more of an influence of doing that. And I also think Kerry just have that bit more firepower up front. Hopefully, David, is that those rumours out there aren't correct. But even at that, you're still bringing like Tony Brosnan, you're still bringing in Killian Spillane. So they still have, I think those forwards might make the difference in the end, but I think it'll go right down to the wire. But yeah, back in Kerry.
Gary.
Yeah, I think we'll see a much improved Mayo. They will score better, they'll be more efficient, but I don't think they'll have improved enough to actually beat Kerry. So I think Kerry have learned enough from their last couple of years' experience. They're coming to Croke Park now kind of warmed, ready. And as much as I said I wouldn't write off Mayo, and I don't, I think Kerry will have enough.
Okay. For what it's worth, I think Dublin will beat Cork. I think Kerry will beat Mayo. I would really like to see Clare going well against Ireland. I have none but respect for what Colin Collins has done, but I think Derry will win, and I actually think it might not be quite as close as you think it's going to be. And I think Galway will beat Armagh.
You'd say that.
Yeah. Thank you to Larry Ryan for running this podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Jack Neville, to Tony Lean for making it happen, to everyone at Examiner of Sport. Thanks to Renault for their support as well. A huge thank you to Oisín McConville and to Bryan Sheehan and to Gary Brennan for joining us today. Béimid Harnash Galua.
Thanks to our sponsors Renault, the Renault Capture, the versatile compact family SUV.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for life.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back